Hello, everyone. Okay, well, let's begin. It's good to see all you guys. I've actually got up early this morning and changed what I was going to do. So I'm going to talk about that, talk about things right now. Let me go to, not there. Here we go. So, first of all, this is the last day of class. Isn't that amazing? Yay. And we made it. And the hangman is due today, and the last repels. Although and the blackjack is due on Friday at midnight. Basically, we're section 2. Believe it or not, the exam for this course is on Saturday afternoon. Strange time, but that's when it is. Come to class. We're all going to get a chance to demonstrate our blackjack programs. And speaking of the blackjack programs, I became aware that a lot of you were struggling with the C++, and I apologize for that. And I'm not going to let it damage your grade too much if you struggled with the C++. And today I was going to do C++ STL, but instead I'm going to do a new POJL I made this morning called POJL Classes 2, and in it we're going to learn exactly the sort of things we need to know to be able to do the blackjack. So it's going to give us another chance to learn about two things. We're going to learn about classes, and then we're going to learn some more about vectors. Okay, and I'm going to do it in pieces. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do the first one, then I'm going to pull you back, give you 15 minutes to do the second one, then I'm going to pull you back, and then we're going to do the last part, and then I'll pull you back. And I will be posting the video of the when we're not in our POJL groups, hopefully later today on this, in case you wanted to review what we learned today. Okay, so make sure that you do push in all your REPL links for all 3 parts, because I'm going to be looking at those and watching those and hopefully helping you if you run into problems on these. And so let's pause. So some of you guys got it, I think. So I'm looking for one that works here real quick. So what we're supposed to do is and the whole point of this was to show you how to make a function work, but it seems like some of you guys got errors. So let's work through this. So here's one that works right here. Hang on here. I'm going to bring it up, and then we're going to talk about it. And I'd like everybody to get theirs going, of course. So this is Jake, your group here. You guys got this running, right? So here we go, right? So the main, of course, you didn't have to change. The main just creates a student with 2 grades, creates another student with 2 grades. And so what we're doing here, student is a new type that we made, right? And we're creating a student called stu1, and this is what we're passing in to put inside of it, right? The whole idea being that we're making these 3 instances of objects. Stu1 has these values, Stu2 has these values, Stu3 has these values. And so in order to make those, we need to call the constructor. Then we call display on all 3, and we update the grades on the first student, which of course is Cindy, and then we print Cindy again, and we see that here. We see Cindy, her grades and her average. Sam, his grades, Ann, her grades, and then Cindy's new grades and a new average. And of course, I gave you this interface, the H file, and here we define a class, and it's got a public part. And the public part has the constructor, which we pass a name and 2 grades to, an average, which we don't pass anything to, but it returns a double, an update grades, which we pass 2 new grades to, but it doesn't return anything, and a display, which should just print everything out, and it doesn't return anything, because void means don't return everything. And that makes sense, because here, notice when we call void, here when we call display, we don't get anything back. Actually, we're never calling anything that we get back here, but we could do something, we could do something like this. We could say cout stu1 dot average, and we should see an extra printout of Cindy's average, which is 94, of course. There it is, right? See, we printed it out there. So what we're doing, though, what I wanted you to do is use average inside of the function. And so here, Jake, tell us what you did here.
So for the constructor, all you really need to do is just assign a name grade 1 and grade 2 to different aliases. In the H file, we're already given the string name and the ints grade 1 and grade 2, but the constructor calls on an n, g1, and g2. So we set name equal to n, grade 1 equal to g1, and grade 2 equal to g2.
Right, so again, the whole point of a constructor is to create one of these things. And so when we call the constructor on stu1, it puts those values inside of it, because here's the private area. It has a name, a grade 1, and a grade 2. So each instance of the object is going to have these 3 values. And this code is taking these parameters and copying into itself. It's setting itself up, right? So this is kind of like, think about this. When you get your new phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android or whatever, when you get it, it's not set up yet, right? And essentially, when you first turn it on, it says hello, and then it starts asking you some questions. That's kind of like its constructor, because you're adding your name, you're adding your login credentials, you're adding other things, and that's like calling the constructor to set your phone up to its initial values. That's what a constructor does. And then, Jake, what's going on in this average here?
So with average, we created a separate variable average that added grades 1 and grade 2, and then divided it by 2, and then we returned that average.
Mm-hmm. And why?
This could also be done in just one line.
Right. What's with the 2.1 here?
The 2.0 is so it returns as a double.
Right, right. If you just put 2 here, it turns out that grade 1, which is an integer, and grade 2 is an integer. If you added them and did it divided by 2, you just do integer division. And even though this is a double, it wouldn't convert it until it copied it over, and you'd never get your decimal points. And so what you need to do is you need to have a double in here to force the computations to be done as double, because that's the way most languages work. Basically, if you mix integers and doubles, it turns everything into doubles before it does its operation. Now down here, this looks fairly similar to what we did in the constructor, right? The only difference, upgrade grade is almost like the constructor, except it only copies in the grades, because we're assuming this name stays the same. We could have an update name if somebody decided to change their name, right? Then we could have another function called update name that allows name changes. And then here's our display, right? And here we print out the name, print out the string grades. We print grade 1, comma, grade 2. Then we print out the word average, colon. and then we call the average function. Now notice what we're doing here, it's kind of funny. It looks kind of funny because we're calling average. We're not passing it anything because average is our own function. And our own function has access to our own variables, right? For example, when you hit the call button on your iPhone, you're calling on your iPhone. You're not calling on somebody else's iPhone next to you, right? This is specific to your phone. You with me? Okay. So let's go on to the second part. We should only need about 15 minutes for that. So let me put you back in your groups. So we were working on yeah, okay. So let's bring this up here. I'm gonna show you guys the solution. Okay, so this is Priya's group. Who's your, yeah, this is Myopoly. Let's talk about your solution here. So what did you do in order to print the grades backwards?
So for the grades erase area, we changed.
No. I'm talking about printing the grades backwards. That's what I'm asking first.
That's how we did it.
Okay.
So in the grades erase thing, there's like a 4 int grade size -1.
Okay.
I is greater than 0. Like in there.
Right. So here, what you're doing is you're saying int I equals a grade sub I is -1. Why the -1 there?
I believe it was because we it would return our biggest number again, so we wanted to make sure it would go back. It would erase that one, I believe.
Well, you're not erasing at this point. You're just printing the grades in backwards order, right?
But yeah.
Right, isn't the point that grades sub size is how many elements there are in the array, and if an array has 5 in it, then the indexes go from 1 to 4, and so if you want to print them in order, you want to go 4, 3, 2, 1, and so this says start at the size -1, go down as long as you're greater than 0. Now that doesn't seem quite right to me. Because notice, you don't want to just go up to 0, you want to include 0. I think you need to meant to have a greater than or equal to. So let's try this. 40, 50, oops, stop and do it again. Let's do 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and then -1. So you entered 5 grades, and that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the average is 40. Now, let's do these in a different order because I think that so notice that yes, you are printing them in the opposite order, so good. And so this counts down from the high to the low. Now, for the printing, notice that we have to say grades.begin plus position. Let's go back up here first, and let's look at dropping the lowest grade. What are we doing in these first 2 lines? Low equals grade 0 and pos equals 0.
It's looking at the position of like the lowest or like the first grade.
That's right. So what's low for? What's the purpose of low?
It just identifies the lowest number in the list.
Well, to start with, it's just the first number in the list, right?
Okay, just the first number. Okay.
Right, and then we set our position equal to 0. What we're trying to do is we're trying to find the lowest, right?
Mhm.
What we're doing here is we're saying, let's pretend like, well, so far, we're going to start with the first one, and let's just assume that the first one is the lowest grade that we've seen so far, because it's the only
Oh,
grade we've seen so far, right?
got okay,
The
okay.
position is the position where we found the lowest, and low is the lowest grade.
Yeah.
Then as we go through, if we ever find a grade that's lower than low, we make that be the new low, and we put its position, in its index into POS, right? Right? Then we can erase the one at position. Now this is kind
Hmm.
of funny, this erase. It's different from Python. And I don't have time to explain it in this class, but basically what this is doing is, you have to do it relative to the beginning. So this is saying the position relative to the beginning is the thing I want you to delete. If you just put position in here, just for the fun of it, notice it doesn't know what you're talking about. It's kind of weird, but that's all the time we have for that. I'm going to move on to the next section. Some of you guys maybe have done it. So let's see here. Stop here, breakout rooms. There we go.
Andrew, are you having trouble getting into your group?
Are you there? Andrew? I think you went in now.
Nope, there he goes. So they found the second part a lot easier than the first part, from what I've seen.
They found the first, what did you say again?
It seems like they found the second part a lot easier than the
Yeah,
first part.
I kind of expected that.
Yeah.
So the second part was to just sort of have them review the vectors so that then they could bring vectors and class together for the third part. And the reason I'm doing that is because I have to use vectors and classes together in the Blackjack lab. So that's sort of the meaning behind my madness. Start the recording. Okay, so let's look at this. Not all of you got this done, and so it's very important that you look very carefully at what we did here. So our goal was to basically, instead of just having 2 grades, was to have a vector of grades so we could add as many grades as we want to each student, right? And that's why we did the last part 2, was to show you how to add grades to a vector and then show you how you could then compute the sums, the averages of those vectors. So let me go ahead and share my screen in the 8 minutes we have left. There we go. So this is my Monopolies group again, and let's see if they've got it. Now, I gave you a new main. So the new main is a little different than the old one, because it shows that the student class is different. Now the constructor, we only pass it a name, because we add the grades later, and we can add as many grades as we want. And then we can display a student that looks from the user side just the same, and then we can add another grade and we can display again. Okay, so this is now what's interesting is we changed the class. Now we changed the way we use the class in some ways, but not in other ways. The display stays the same. The constructor is different, and then we added this new thing, add grade. And so down here we can see the interface. We can see that in the private section, we removed the two individual grades, and now we have a vector of grades, just like in the previous thing. And here, we still have the name. And then I have 5 functions. I have a constructor, just like before. I have this thing that allows us to add a grade, and it's a void because it doesn't return anything. Average returns the average. Void displays everything, and void drop lowest is supposed to drop the lowest score. So what you had to do then was to modify, to make a new version of student.cpp that did all those things. And so let's look at this. Here, the student now only records the name. It says easier setup. Now let's go down first and look at add grade. Add grade is very simple. Add grade takes a grade G and pushes it on the back of the grades vector. Remember, grades is a vector that's inside the object. So we're saying, take this grade from the outside world and put it into our class, which has a list of grades for this student. Okay? Now the average is just like what we did in the previous thing, right? When we want to do average, grades is our list of our grades. And so we can simply go through and add them all up, divide by how many grades we have. They smartly converted it to a double so that we get a decimal point, and then we return the average. Now display is a little different because now we don't know how many grades we have until we call display. So instead of just printing out grade 1 and grade 2, this has a for loop that goes from 0 and it's up to 1 less than the size of the grades. And it prints each of the grades, grade, 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 grade. And then we print the average by calling the average function, which calls our own average function on our own grades. So I don't know, does this work? Let's try this. So seems like something's wrong here. Did you guys not get it to work? Oh, no, you have it. Grade 0 is 87, grade 1 is 67, grade 2 is 93, and then here's the average. Here's SAM, they have grade 0 is 88, grade 1 is 91, and here's the average. And then we drop the lowest score, so the 67 goes away, and our average goes from 82.333 to 84. So how does the drop the lowest work? It works just like the code I just showed you. It searches for the lowest score, and it erases it, right? And so the cool thing is, and this is important to understand this, the whole point of this is that we can change the class without necessarily making a huge number of differences. In fact, in some cases, if you don't change the interface on a class, you can do all sorts of things to a class, but the user of the class never knows it, right? They can't tell that there's a difference, right? This is kind of like on your phone. When you upgrade to the newest version of Android, you may not notice any differences, or iOS, right? But there's changes in there. There's probably lots and lots of changes to make it better. And so we can change a student on the inside without necessarily changing the interface. In this case, we did change the interface for some of the things. We didn't change the display. We didn't change the average. We added drop lowest. We removed the update grades and just added an add grade. And then, of course, we changed the constructor because we don't want to give grades when we construct it now because we don't know how many, we have an arbitrary number of grades that we might add. Okay. So going over here, I don't know. Does anybody have any questions, I guess? Okay, so it's important. It's really, really important that you understand this, because if you don't understand this, maybe you want to come to my office hours, or maybe you want to continue to study it. But it's very important. This is a key understanding to objects, not just for C++, for Python as well, frankly. The whole concept of an object is something that contains values, and then it has controls that we call methods. And so we can do things to it, and it's self-contained. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the class. I've enjoyed having you in the class. I look forward to seeing you guys on Saturday for your final presentation. And don't worry, the final project isn't worth more than any other projects. And there is no final exam portion of the grade. So it's not like, it's not like, oh, this is going to be worth a whole lot more. So don't get too upset about it. Okay, but please come to my office hours. I plan on holding office hours on Thursday and Friday, even though we won't have classes. And you have until midnight on Friday to get the blackjack done. So I'm going to drop out to office hours now, and so come and see me there if you have more questions or you want to talk more.